In this video, and I just want to check that the camera started, someone has asked me about rotary cutting when sitting in a wheelchair, or in this case a walker on wheels. I don't use my wheelchair as often as I did, but I do use my walker. And my walker is on wheels, and it's kind of the same idea. And you can tell, probably, lining the wheels up with a table can sometimes be a little bit difficult. This is an OmniGrip ruler. Underneath here I have a cutting mat under the fabric, and I have a Singer rotary cutter. And I know for my own use that it's easier when you, and I'm going to push the walker away for a minute, when you can stand up and apply pressure to your fabric. Now, I don't even know if that cut, because this is an old blade. It did cut through one layer, and this is heavy flannel. So let's do that again. And this is when I'm standing. Yeah, so that's an old blade, or there are like 3 layers there. So to get through this fabric, I have to push down. With more pressure, I haven't used one of these in a while, but with more pressure than you would think. And it didn't go through the second layer. So that's an example of standing and rotary cutting your fabric. Just going to move my face mask for a minute. Now, when you add sitting down, you have the same thing. You don't have the same leverage that you have when you're standing. This is through the second layer there. And that's not cutting well either. This is not a really old blade. And the person who asked me about this also said she kept replacing blades. I don't think we're talking about the blade. I think we're talking about the ability to put pressure on a rotary cutter evenly and quickly. And let me just get rid of this thicker fabric. This is the end of a sheet, and have the heading on the sheet there. So we'll just cut this off. And it's always good to test these. Anytime you're having a problem, test things out on scrap or rag fabric. So we'll put that aside, because that's like 3 layers of flannel. Here is 2 layers of flannel, same cutting board, same ruler, same everything, only now I'm sitting down. So you saw, whether it's the blade I have or whether I wasn't pressing hard enough, whatever it was, I had to cut that 2 or 3 times. So let's say I line it up and I want to cut it right here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is put the brakes on my walker, and you can do that with most wheelchairs also, and get the walker as close as possible to the table. The other thing you want to consider at this point, I was thinking yesterday that a bed or even my typing table is lower. And if you can use a lower table, you're going to have more leverage. The problem comes in when you can't get your arm high enough to really push down without it being uncomfortable. So here I am, I'm in a walker, I've got the brakes on, and I really have to push down, and then I get a good cut. Not your typical rotary cutting. Now, let me stand up. A lot of people don't have the option to stand up, but when you stand up, the main thing I'm concerned with standing up is that it's not going to slip and hit my finger. But when you stand up, applying that pressure is much easier. So the suggestion I would have for anyone in a wheelchair, a couple of them, put your brakes on. If I were cutting the long length like I had it before, I think it's kind of going to be a pain in the neck. I think you have to line up your fabric. Let's say you're trying to cut out an 18-inch quilt something or other, or an 18-inch pattern, fabric with some kind of sewing pattern. I think what you would have to do is this. It's difficult, and you have to push down. I'm trying to think of a similar action. You know when you close a can of paint, that even before you get the hammer out to hammer the lid down on the can of paint, you have to push it down as tightly as you can to keep it tight. That's how much pressure we're talking about, and it still didn't cut. And yet a moment ago when I was standing, it cut fine. So now if this is an 18-inch fabric piece, I actually then feel I would move the fabric and basically only cut about 10 or 12 inches at a time. So that's why I think this is annoying and more difficult for people that are in wheelchairs or walkers, because of the amount of pressure you really have to put down to get that to cut. And you still have to use all the same precautions. So to cut, let's say I'm making sashing, just to cut the sashing, I've now had to move the fabric twice. And if I'm making rag sashing, I've got that seam allowance at the end there. It's kind of an ergonomic challenge, because you do have to lift. I'm right-handed. You have to lift your arm up higher than normal to get the leverage to cut the fabric. I've been thinking about it since yesterday. I can't come up with any other quick, easy solution other than my cutting mat here is about 15, maybe 16 inches left to right. So I think that's the limit of how wide I can cut a fabric at a time. So if I had to cut out, say, 100 squares for a quilt project or something, and they were going to be like 3.5 or 4 inches, it's going to just take longer. It's just going to take longer to do it. And frankly, I think personally at that point I would buy a plastic template and use scissors. The whole point of a rotary cutter, and I'll stand up again, is to do things quickly, to be able to zip right through the fabric and do things quickly. And I just don't think that's going to happen when you have to sit all the time to do it. And so, like I said, for myself, I would buy, OmniGrip makes nice templates. I would buy a template and use scissors. I think it's actually faster with scissors than with a rotary cutter. So I'm sorry I couldn't come up with a miracle solution. I think it's just arm strength, angle, and patience.